Brigantia Blackbird, a Blackbird's Brew. Happy Monday and welcome to Norse Studies. This week we are covering Chapter 12 of Germanic Heathenry by Practical Guide by James Coulter. The title is chaptered Samal. The chapter was written in a particularly exasperating way, to the point where the author was so busy rambling about his feelings and his perceptions of Samal that he failed to adequately define within the text what a Samal is. Thankfully, a glossary at the end of the book provides a succinct explanation. Samal, a ritual drinking feast. But instead of just saying that from the get-go, which would have actually communicated information, the author got lost in his magnificent personal opinions. Again. And as the chapter went on, the author once again betrayed his preoccupation with roles and positions and rank. Now, during a ritual, it is perfectly fair and proper to describe the various different jobs participants can perform and what the function of those jobs are. But it is an entirely different matter to rank those roles as actual ranks and to place greater emphasis upon the perceived prestige of the role as opposed to what the role is supposed to be accomplishing. Now, without being too tedious about it, I will very briefly share what roles the author discussed. The first was the host, which is just the person who's offering their home or another building or space that they have the charge of for the Samal itself. Then you have the Thalling, who is apparently supposed to keep track of everything that's said and done within the place where the Samal is being held. The Mina singer, who's essentially a bard. Why we can't just say bard, I don't know. Then we have the Fraua and her handmaidens, who prepare and sanctify the place where the Samal is held and attend to the passing around of drinks throughout the Samal. I will not bore you with the further details of what the author considers to be the further responsibilities and authorities of these roles. He conveys an image of airless formality, a formality that I do not see reflected in the videos of pagan groups who actually share their rituals. Next, the author lists what items he deems necessary for Samal, beginning with a contained space, meaning someplace with a roof and walls. The author declares that a Samal must never be held out of doors. I don't know who died and put him in charge of such matters, but there can be no doubt as to his opinion. And all I can say is that it seems that not all pagan and heathen groups agree with him, at least not to the extent that this must never be done. And I would bring up the evidence of YouTube. Now, he might not consider them real heathens or real pagans or doing things right, but nevertheless, people seem to be doing it. They seem to enjoy the occasions, and from what I can tell, the gods aren't pissed. So, there you go. Now, what's more telling about all this is that it's yet another example of the author's attitude. If things can't be absolutely perfect and flawless and historically accurate to the nth degree and just so in the way he thinks they should be done, then it shouldn't be done at all. I mean, that is really the attitude he's bringing to this chapter. There's just no spirit of reasonableness or acknowledgement that circumstances are not always going to be ideal. They just aren't. And people do the best they can with what they have where they are, and that's perfectly honorable and, to as far as I can tell, perfectly acceptable. And certainly there's no indication that the author thinks there could possibly be another valid opinion or even entertains the thought that he could be mistaken in any of his views. It must be very agreeable to have such confidence. Now, I am all for standing by your own point of view. I know I certainly do. But at a certain point, there needs to be some humility, particularly when it comes to spiritual matters, how rituals conducted. We don't know how things evolved and how they changed in the pre-Christian era because we just don't have that information. And it is also a distinct possibility that endlessly fussing about all of these details is a human concern rather than something the gods are worried about. Next item on his list was table and seating. Obviously, it's helpful to have places to sit and drink and a spot to put your drink and your food. I mean, it is a ritual feasting after all. You need a drinking vessel, which is another no-brainer. Rather difficult to drink toast without having something to drink from. Pitcher for the pouring of drinks. The author finds putting the drinks into a pitcher so that you can then pour that from the pitcher. It adds to the formality and the holiness of the occasion. I like a good formal dinner party. I do. And I am all for having a beautiful presentation if you have the ability and the means to do so. I'm all for that. but he's putting the formality as an end in and of itself. And I don't know that it is any more holy to put the drinks into a pitcher that's then put into a goblet for an individual versus someone, having a bottle with them. I don't know that, the more formal way necessarily makes it more holy. I mean, surely that is a matter of your heart's intention, and whether or not you are fully present in the whole of your being for the stated purpose. I would think that's where the holiness comes from, but clearly the author and I don't agree. Next thing on his list is a winding horn used to call the gods, spirits, and folk to assemble. Banners, which he admits is more decorative than anything else. And again, if I had a proper heathen banner, I would use it during rituals for sure, because it's nice and it does add to it, but it is still a decorative touch. And let's not get too carried away by it. Then he has drought, which is just a word that means what people are drinking. Now, amazingly, he does suggest having non-alcoholic drinks available for people who shouldn't drink alcohol for whatever reason. And this accommodation absolutely astonished me because, our author, he thinks he does best. So I was actually fully prepared in this section for him to say that if someone can't drink alcohol, then they can't be part of Samal and they can't be a heathen. I was braced for that, but it seems that, there's a residue of common decency within him. Next item on the list is altar. Every spiritual occasion should have a focal point, and of course the altar is that. Bowl and ladle for ritual purposes, candles and lanterns. And the author is of the opinion that artificial lighting makes the occasion less holy and suggests candles and lanterns for lighting, which may or may not be practical. But I don't really think that the author cares about practicalities or what is within someone's means to do. He likes formalities for formality's sake and doing things for the aesthetic. Instead of having the honor to admit that these are his personal preferences, he couches them as spiritual requirements. Now, I will agree it is much more atmospheric to have a place lit just with candles or lanterns or something of that kind, but I'm also perfectly aware that sometimes that isn't always a practical thing to do, particularly, if let's say someone has something prepared that they want to say and they need to be able to read it. Candle and lantern light aren't always going to get it done. And, memorization, I don't think that's anyone's strongest suit. That's a skill we can develop, but to say that, oh, you had to start out that way, I mean, talk about performance pressure, even if you're doing this on your own. And another thing is that, let's say that, you've rented out, some public place for your Samal. Okay, wonderful. That was expensive, but okay, wonderful. Let's say that building doesn't permit people to have lit flames within it. A lot of them don't for insurance pieces. Are you just going to say, oh well, I'm just going to do what I want? Well, okay, but supposing they don't rent to you ever again and they find out about it. So, or suppose there was an accident, you're having to explain, that might not just give a bad impression of you as someone who they may decline to ever rent to ever again. That could also lend them a very bad impression of pagans and heathens in general. So, there are some things that it's nice to have if you can, but there's other things that, maybe that's not the most important thing. Let's see, also on the list, and this is last on his items, is a representation of Irminsul or the World Tree or a spear in place of that. Now, as if all of this hasn't been riveting enough, the author then describes the order of events for Samal, and he wraps up this chapter with more rambling about his own personal impressions. So first things first, set up the hall. This is an obvious thing to do. If, you and I were having a dinner party at home, we'd clean the house and set the table, prepare the food, and have everything ready to go. You set up the hall for Samal, and that it's all for the same reason, just to be ready when company arrives. Then you do clearing, which is a spiritual cleansing of the space. Wind the horn, which is blowing the horn 3 times to begin the ritual. Then you have seating arrangements, and the author had a great deal to say about proper seating arrangements. And he actually admitted that his focus upon this might seem pretentious. Might. But he doubled down on how necessary it all is for the sake of holiness. I mean, he really does seem to think that it is the external that conveys holiness rather than holiness emanating from within. He wrote about the whole process of there being a specific person who greets people at the door, and he shows them to their seats and has this whole rigmarole, what have you. And for my part, if you want to have an assigned seating arrangement, that's perfectly fine. If that's something that's important to you, just put down place cards. Surely you are inviting people who know how to read their own names. That would serve the purpose of, making sure that everyone was where they were supposed to be without creating a rather stuffy ceremony where none is actually needed, or having a ceremony without any benefit to it. Next order in the events is in closing, the door to the hall is shut, and then it's ritually and magically sealed. Then there's a welcoming of the gods in the whites, which is just what it sounds like. Then there's an opening speech. The host welcomes the attendees, explains what they're doing and how they're doing it. That's pretty standard for any ritual, particularly if you have people who are newcomers to the group. You want them to know what's going on and why. It makes them more comfortable, and it makes everything go more smoothly. Then you have the round of drinks and toasts. The first round is to honor the gods and goddesses. The second round is for the ancestors and heroes, both ancient and modern. The third round is for gift-giving, oath-taking, boasting, and other what he calls matters of significance. And then closing, that ends the rounds. The gods and other unseen participants are thanked for their presence and farewelled. Magical protections are taken down, the energy is grounded, and any leftover drink is poured into a designated spot outside. Now, the last bit of the chapter, the author is just rehashing his previous thoughts and expanding upon him. This is a man who would have really benefited from having a good editor to prod him into a smoother organization of the text. Now, it has occurred to me that perhaps this book is the result after an editor got a hold of it, and this is really the best he could do after having a tug of wills with the author. And if that's indeed the case, I shudder to imagine what drudgery the original draft of the book was. I think you really have to work hard and go out of your way to take Samal or any other kind of pagan or heathen ritual, which is something that's wonderful and it's an enjoyable occasion, to take that and then turn it into this very stiff, pretentious, constipated affair. I've complained before that there seems to be a clear division between pagans and heathens who get it, and then those who can't see the forest for the trees, and the author is definitely in the latter category. Next week, we'll cover the chapter on feigning, which is how to conduct Germanic pagan celebrations. I expect it will be just as thrilling as this week's chapter was, but we only have 3 more weeks to go in this book, and then this particular video series will be taking a break from the books. I'll be, doing things in a slightly different format. I don't think we need to go over 50 books and go over the same basics a million times just to get the gist of it all. So hang in there with me. We've broken the back of this rather tedious publication, and we will be soon on to much more practical application, much more let's just start doing the thing and living it type of stuff. So that's where we're at. Leave your own comments, questions, whatever you have to say in the comment section below for me, or come see me and the rest of the group on Gilded. There's a link in the description box, which will take you to our Gilded server. It's called Blackbird's Brew, and we'd be very happy to have you. But that'll do it for now, and I will see you next time. Bye.